wind in the New Mexico territory did not know about kindness. It came down from the mountains in the year 1875, tasting of red dust and the bones of animals long dead. It peeled the paint from the false front buildings of Silver Mesa and rattled the glass in Evelyn Carter's small cabin. The town itself was a scar, dug into the high desert for the silver that made men crazy. It was a place of miners with the lungs full of rock dust, soldiers with uniforms bleached by the sun, and traders who weighed their thumbs with the goods. Evelyn Carter was a widow. Her husband had been one of those soldiers, but a bullet from a gun he never saw had ended that life back east. Now she was here, breathing this sharp air, working as a nurse in the town's small infirmary. It was not a hospital. It was 2 rooms with 6 beds, smelling of carbolic acid and stale sweat. Her cabin sat apart from the main street, clinging to the edge of a shallow canyon. She had chosen it for the view, a wide expanse of red rock and pale sky that stretched into the Navajo lands, the land the soldiers called hostile territory. She was afraid here. Every night the snap of a twig could make her heart jump. The howl of a coyote sounded like a human scream, but beneath the fear, something else was growing. A feeling so quiet she barely dared to name it. It felt like freedom. It was the vast emptiness, the lack of fences, the sense that a person could truly be lost out here, and perhaps truly be found. The tension in Silver Mesa was as thick as the dust. It coated everything. The white men, the miners, and the soldiers spoke of the Navajo as savages, as shadows that needed to be cleared out so the work of progress could continue. The Navajo, who came to town only to trade, moved with a quiet dignity that looked like arrogance to the loud men in the saloon. Their eyes held the patience of the stone and the heat of the sun. Evelyn saw them and felt a prickle of shame for the way the town treated them. Dr. Abraham Wells was the head of the infirmary. He was a man who believed in 2 things, whiskey and amputation. He saw Evelyn as a useful pair of hands. Nothing more. He was a large man. His face flushed, and he distrusted her Eastern education. Book learning does not help when a man is bleeding out. Mistress Carter, he had told her on her first day. Here, we are practical. Practicality, she learned, meant saving the white men and patching up the Mexicans or the Chinese just enough so they could go back to work for the mining company. The natives, they did not come to the infirmary. They had their own medicine, hidden in the hills. Until today. The day had started like any other. The sun was a hot copper coin in the sky. She had been changing the dressings on a miner who had lost 2 fingers to a blasting cap. Then the doors of the infirmary banged open, striking the wall. 2 soldiers, their blue uniforms dark with sweat, dragged a man between them. He was Navajo. "Dr. Wells," the corporal said, his voice rough. "We got a live one. Captain wants him patched up. For questioning." Dr. Wells came out of his small office, wiping his mouth with a handkerchief. He scowled when he saw the man. "Put him on the cot in the corner, and make sure he is bound. I will not have a savage loose in my infirmary." The man was bleeding. A dark, wet stain was spreading across the buckskin leggings on his left thigh. It was a bullet wound. High up, he was tall, even when slumped between the 2 soldiers. They dumped him onto the narrow cot with a grunt. He made no sound. Evelyn moved forward, her nurse's instincts taking over. "He needs that bleeding stopped." "You stay back, Mistress Carter," Dr. Wells snapped. "I will tend to him. You finish with Mr. Hannity." But she could not look away. The Navajo man pushed himself up onto one elbow. His black hair was long, tied back with a simple leather thong. His face was stark, all angles and shadows, streaked with dirt and dried blood. He was not looking at the doctor or the soldiers. He was looking at her. Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. It was not a look of pleading or of fear. It was pure, unfiltered hatred. But beneath that, there was something else. A current of strength so potent it was like a physical blow. His eyes were the blackest she had ever seen, deep and hard as obsidian. yet alive, like embers glowing in a dying fire. He looked at her as if she were the one who had shot him, as if she were the embodiment of every wrong ever done to his people. He looked at her, and he saw everything. She was white, female, an intruder. She felt her face flush, a heat that had nothing to do with the day. She was pinned by that gaze. Stripped bare. This was not just a man. This was the wildness she looked at from her cabin window. It was the land itself, given human form, and it was wounded, and it was furious. She took an involuntary step back. Kohana felt the world tilt. The pain in his leg was a hot fire, but he had known worse. What held his mind was the smell, the sharp, sick smell of the white man's medicine. It was the smell of death and lies. He had been tracking the soldiers, the ones who had burned a hogan with a grandmother still inside, when the patrol had ambushed him. He had fought, but there were too many. They wanted him alive. That was bad. Alive meant they wanted names. They wanted to know about the canyons, about the places where his people were hiding. He would die before he spoke a word. He braced himself on the cot, his muscles tense, ready to fight even with the bone-deep throb in his leg. His vision cleared. The big red-faced man was the medicine man. He smelled of sour grain. The soldiers were just dogs, waiting for an order. Then he saw her. She was pale, like all of them, but different. Her hair was the color of dark honey, pulled back from a face that was not hard, not yet. She wore the white apron of a healer, but her eyes were not a healer's eyes. They were wide, and for a moment, he saw fear in them, but it was not fear of him. It was a different kind of fear, something deeper. She looked at him, and he saw his own hatred reflected there, but also something else, a flicker of something. It was gone before he could name it. He held her gaze. He wanted her to see what he was. He was dying. He was a warrior. He was not a dog to be tied up on a cot. He poured all his contempt, all his pain, all his strength into that one look. Let her see. Let the white woman see what they had done. Evelyn turned away, her hands trembling slightly. She went back to the miner, her fingers suddenly clumsy as she tried to tie the bandage. "Get some rope," Dr. Wells ordered the corporal. "Tie his hands to the bed frame. I will not be scalped while I work." The soldier nodded and went to fetch it. Evelyn finished with the miner's hand. "He is done. Mr. Hannity, you can go." The miner, a small, wiry man with pale eyes, shuffled his feet. He kept looking over at the Navajo. "Is it safe? Mistress Carter, having him here, we got women in this town." "He is wounded and will be tied," Evelyn said, her voice sharper than she intended. "You are safe." The miner left, muttering to himself. Evelyn began to clean the instruments, her back to the room. She could feel the man's eyes on her. She could feel his silence. It was louder than the doctor's grumbling. Dr. Wells approached the cot. "All right, you savage. Let us see what damage my own men have done." He ripped the buckskin legging away from the wound. The Navajo man did not flinch. His body went rigid, but he made no sound. His eyes were closed now, his face a mask of stone. "A clean shot." The doctor grunted, probing the wound with a dirty finger. "Through the meat, missed the bone. He is lucky." He turned to Evelyn. "Mistress Carter, stop fiddling with those tools. I need water and clean cloths. And the laudanum?" "A lot of it." "Not for him." He added with a grim chuckle, "For me, dealing with his kind is thirsty work." Evelyn retrieved the items. She brought the basin of water to the cot. She still could not look at him directly. She looked at the wound. It was deep, bleeding sluggishly. It needed to be cleaned and stitched. "Hold his leg down," Dr. Wells ordered. Evelyn put her hands on the man's thigh, far above the wound. His skin was hot, shockingly so. Through the buckskin, she could feel the hard, coiled muscle. Even wounded, he felt powerful. He opened his eyes again. This time, the hatred was gone. It was replaced by a cold, weary assessment. He was looking at her hands on him. She felt like she had touched a hot stove. She did not pull away. She was a nurse. This was her job. "I am here to help you," she whispered, not knowing why she said it. The words were absurd. His lips twisted, a fractional movement that was not a smile. He said nothing. "Speak English, you heathen," Dr. Wells demanded, pulling a bottle of whiskey from his coat. He did not pour it on the wound. He took a long drink himself. No, did not think so. He handed the bottle to Evelyn. "Clean it." She hesitated. "Doctor, should we not boil the water and use carbolic?" "Whiskey is faster." He dismissed her. "And stronger. Pour it on. It will burn the rot out of him." Evelyn looked at the wound, then at the man's face. He was watching her. She knew this would be agony. She uncorked the bottle. "This will hurt," she said, her voice low. She poured the raw whiskey directly into the bullet hole. The man's entire body arched off the cot. A low sound, like a growl, was torn from his throat. His hands, not yet tied, clenched into fists at his side. His eyes blazed into hers, and in them she saw the red desert, the burning sun, and a pain so vast it swallowed her whole. But he did not scream. He just watched her, his chest heaving, as the fire they poured into him met the fire that was already there. Evelyn Carter felt something break inside her. It was the thin wall she had built between her old life and this one. The man on the cot was not just a savage. He was a human being in terrible pain. And his eyes, they held more life, more raw truth than any she had ever seen. She finished her shift as the sun began to bleed into the western sky, painting the cliffs in shades of orange and purple. The Navajo warrior, Kohana the soldiers had called him, was stitched and tied to the cot. He had not spoken. He had not taken the water she offered. He just lay there, conscious, watching. She walked home to her cabin, the wind pulling at her skirts. The air was cooling, but she still felt the heat from his gaze. That night, she did not light her lamp. She sat in the darkness, looking out at the vast, wild land that stretched before her. It was his land, and for the first time, she did not feel afraid of it. She felt a strange, terrifying pull. The feeling of freedom had a new name. It had a face, and it had eyes as dark and dangerous as the coming night. The silence in the infirmary was heavy, broken only by the breathing of the two men in the other beds and the distant, tinny sound of a piano from the Golden Nugget Saloon. It must have been past 2 in the morning. Evelyn Carter sat on a stool, her shoulders aching. She had checked Kohana's bindings. They were secure. His fever had not risen, but his skin was hot and dry. He had not slept. His eyes were closed. But his stillness was not the stillness of rest. It was the stillness of a mountain lion waiting. She had spent the hours since her shift ended watching him, unable to go to her own cabin. She had been wiping his forehead with a cool, damp cloth. He had flinched at her touch at first, his muscles tensing, but he had not opened his eyes. She felt like a traitor, tending to a man her people considered an enemy, and she felt a deeper treason for the part of her that did not care what her people thought. The piano music stopped, replaced by the sound of shouting and heavy boots on the boardwalk. The sound grew closer. Evelyn stood, her heart suddenly cold. The infirmary doors flew open, slamming against the plaster wall. 6 miners stumbled in, their faces flushed with whiskey and rage. Hank, the man whose hand she had bandaged, was at their head. He held a length of rope. "We knew it," Hank slurred, pointing a thick finger at her. "The soldier said you was sweet on the savage, letting him live, wasting medicine on him." "Get out of here, Hank," Evelyn said, her voice shaking but firm. She moved to stand between the miners and Kohana's cot. "This is an infirmary. You are drunk." "We are here for justice," another man said, his eyes small and mean. "That savage killed Will Spencer's brother last spring. We are finishing what the soldiers should have." Hank pushed past her. shoving her hard. Evelyn stumbled back, hitting the wall. "You tie a noose, boys. I will hold the witch." Kohana's eyes were open. They were not wide with fear. They were narrow, black slits of pure concentration. He was looking at the rope, then at the men, then at Evelyn. He began to pull against the leather straps that bound his wrists to the iron bed frame. "No!" Evelyn screamed. She scrambled to her feet and grabbed Hank's arm. "You cannot. This is murder. He is a wounded prisoner." Get your hands off me, you redskin lover!" Hank roared. He backhanded her across the face. The force of the blow sent her crashing to the floor. Pain exploded in her cheek, and she tasted the salt of her own blood. The men laughed. 2 of them were trying to get the rope around Kohana's neck. The warrior thrashed, his wounded leg forgotten. He was all muscle and desperation, but he was tied fast. Evelyn saw the room through a haze of tears and fury. She was not a fighter. She was a nurse, but the sight of those men, their stupid, drunken cruelty, ignited something in her. She saw the heavy stoneware basin she had used to clean his wound. It was still half full of bloody water. She grabbed it with both hands, raised it high, and brought it down on the back of Hank's head. There was a sickening, wet crack. Hank grunted and pitched forward onto the floor, unconscious. The other miners froze, staring at her. Evelyn stood over Hank, the broken pieces of the basin at her feet, her chest heaving. "Get out," she whispered, her voice raw. "The witch is crazy," one of them stammered. "She has killed Hank. She is one of them now." Their shock turned back to anger. They advanced on her, not Kohana. "You will pay for that, girl." A sound split the air. It was a sharp crack of leather, followed by a grunt. One of the miners closest to the cot cried out and clutched his throat. Kohana was on his feet. He had snapped the cheap leather strap on his right wrist. In his hand, he held the small surgical knife Evelyn had left on the bedside table. He was swaying, his face pale with the effort, his wounded leg buckling, but he was standing. He cut the other strap in a single, fluid motion. He shoved the miner who was clutching his throat into the other 2, sending them sprawling. The room was suddenly, terrifyingly quiet. The miners, who had been brave against a tied man and a lone woman, were now facing a Navajo warrior, armed and free. Kohana was bleeding heavily from his stitches, which had torn, but his eyes were lethal. He held the small knife as if he knew how to use it. He said nothing. He just breathed, harsh and low, and placed himself between Evelyn and the remaining men. "He is loose," one of them whispered, scrambling backward. "He will kill us all." They did not wait. They dragged the groaning form of Hank out the door and disappeared into the night, their shouts of "Savage is loose" echoing down the empty street. Evelyn was shaking so badly she could not stand. She leaned against the wall, her hand pressed to her bleeding mouth. Kohana stood for a long moment, listening. Then he swayed, and his hand went to his wounded leg. He looked at the knife in his hand, then dropped it. It clattered on the floor. "They will return," he said. His voice was a low rasp, the first words he had ever spoken to her. What have we done?" she whispered. "You," he said, looking at her with an intensity that burned. "You are not safe now." Footsteps were already pounding on the boardwalk. Not the miners. This was a heavy, deliberate tread. Dr. Abraham Wells burst in, a shotgun in his hands. He took in the scene: Evelyn on the floor, her face bruised, the overturned cot, the bloody knife, and Kohana, standing free, his leg wound soaking his leggings in fresh, dark blood. "Mistress Carter," the doctor bellowed, his face purple. "You did this! You set him free! You attacked those men!" "They were going to hang him," Evelyn cried, pushing herself up. "They hit me." "You chose," Dr. Wells said, his voice flat and cold. He pointed the shotgun at Kohana. "You chose this savage over your own. You are finished here. You are dismissed, Mistress Carter." Get your things and get out of this town before they hang you right next to him." Shouts were rising from the street. A crowd was gathering. "Get the rope! Burn the infirmary!" Kohana looked at the doctor, then at the door, then at Evelyn. He made his choice. He moved faster than she could have believed, grabbing her arm in a grip of iron. "No," she cried, trying to pull away. "We go," he commanded. He did not look at Dr. Wells. He yanked her toward the back door of the infirmary, the one that led to the alley and the dark cliffs beyond. Dr. Wells raised the shotgun. "Stop, or I will shoot." Kohana did not stop. He pulled Evelyn through the door and into the darkness, using her body as a shield. No shot came. Dr. Wells, it seemed, was not willing to shoot a white woman in the back. "Where are we going?" Evelyn sobbed, stumbling over the rocks in the dark alley. The shouts of the mob were behind them, a roaring wave of hatred. "My home," Kohana said, his voice tight with pain. He was pulling her up, forcing a pace she could not maintain. He shoved her up the first rocky incline of the canyon wall, his hand on her back, pushing her forward. "The mountains. If we stay, we die." Evelyn looked back. Torches were lit in Silver Mesa. The town she had tried to join now looked like the gateway to hell. She turned her face to the darkness ahead and began to climb. The flight was a blur of pain and terror. Kohana moved with a grim, wounded purpose. He knew paths that were not paths, narrow ledges and dry waterfalls, ways up the rock that she would have sworn were impassable. He never spoke, except to say, "Here," or "Quiet." He limped heavily, leaving small drops of blood on the stone. But he did not slow. Her lungs burned. Her thin shoes were shredded. Her hands were raw from gripping the rough sandstone. She was a town woman. She was not made for this. Several times she fell, and each time he hauled her to her feet with an impatient strength that bordered on cruelty. He was not saving her. He was forcing her to survive. She was a traitor. The word echoed in her mind with every step. She had assaulted a white man. She had freed a prisoner. She had fled with a savage. There was no going back. The life she had known was over. Just before dawn, when she was certain she could not take another step, he pushed aside a curtain of dry vines hanging from a rock overhang. Behind it was a narrow opening, a crack in the stone. "In," he whispered. She crawled inside. It opened up into a wide, shallow cave, sheltered from the wind. Kohana followed her, then collapsed onto the sandy floor. He lay on his back, his chest heaving, his face gray in the pale light. His leg was a ruin of blood and dirt. Evelyn, her terror momentarily forgotten, knelt beside him. "Your leg! The stitches are all gone! Oh God! It is bleeding so much!" He looked at her, his eyes clouded with pain. "Why?" he panted. "Why what?" "In the town. Why stop them? They are your people." Evelyn sat back on her heels. The question was too large. "They were wrong," she said, her voice small. "It was not civilized." A faint, dry chuckle escaped him. Civilized. He looked at the cave ceiling. "White men kill. It is civilized. My people kill. It is savage." He closed his eyes. Water. She had nothing. No bag, no canteen, no medicine. She was useless. He slept, or fell into unconsciousness, for hours, when the sun was high. Evelyn crept to the mouth of the cave. She looked out. They were high up, overlooking a vast canyon she had never seen. There was no sign of the town. There was no sign of anyone. There was only rock and sky. She felt a wave of dizziness. She was afraid, but it was a different fear from the one she had felt in town. This was the fear of emptiness, of nature. It felt cleaner. She spent the day watching him, terrified he would die. As evening fell, he woke. He drank handfuls of water from a small, dark pool he showed her, hidden in the back of the cave. He tore a strip of cloth from his own shirt and, with a face like stone, bound his wound tightly. He sat cross-legged, watching her. "They will hunt us," he said. "The soldiers. Everyone." For 2 days they hid. Kohana ate nothing. He gave her a piece of dried meat he took from a pouch at his belt. It was tough and tasted of smoke, but it gave her strength. He spent his time in a state of quiet, his eyes closed. He was not praying. It seemed to her he was gathering strength from the rock itself. On the third morning, he stood. "It is time." They walked. He was weaker, his limp profound, but he moved with certainty. They descended into the hidden canyon. By midday, they rounded a bend, and Evelyn stopped. The canyon floor opened into a small, green valley. A stream ran through it. Horses, more beautiful than any she had ever seen, grazed freely. Hidden among the cottonwood trees were several hogans, low-set structures of earth and wood. Smoke rose from their centers. It was a place of peace. Navajo people emerged as they approached. Women in beautiful woven blankets stopped their work. Children, naked and dusty, stared with huge dark eyes. Old men sat in the sun, their faces like carved wood. They saw Kohana, and a murmur of greeting rose. They walked toward him. Then they saw Evelyn. The greetings died. The faces hardened. The women pulled their children behind them. The men looked at Kohana, their expressions a mixture of confusion and anger. An old woman, her face a web of 1,000 lines, stepped forward. She spat on the ground at Evelyn's feet. "Why do you bring this?" she asked Kohana, her voice like gravel. Kohana stood tall, though Evelyn could see him shaking from the effort. He spoke to his people in their own language. It was fast, filled with sounds Evelyn could not place. He gestured to her, then to his leg. He spoke for a long time. When he finished, the old woman stared at Evelyn. "He says you saved his life." Evelyn began. "Yes." "You are white," the woman stated. "You are the enemy. Your people burn our homes." "I am not," Evelyn said, desperation rising in her throat. I have no people. The town, they tried to kill me too." The old woman considered this. She looked at Kohana. He was swaying. He needed help. The woman barked an order. 2 men rushed forward and supported Kohana, helping him toward one of the hogans. Evelyn tried to follow. "I am a nurse. I can help him. I have medicine. I know how—" The old woman blocked her path with a body as solid as an old tree trunk. "No," she said, her English sharp. "You will not touch him. Your medicine is poison. You will wait." Evelyn was left alone in the center of the village. She was an outcast again. The Navajo ignored her. They went back to their work, but she could feel their eyes on her, suspicious and cold. She watched from a distance as they tended to Kohana. They did not use stitches or whiskey. A medicine man. His body painted with white clay came. They built a small, clean fire. They burned herbs that smelled like sage and pine. The medicine man chanted, his voice rising and falling like the wind. They carried Kohana into the hogan, and the healing smoke rose from the smoke hole. Evelyn sat by the stream, her sense of failure complete. She was terrified of these people, but as she watched them, a different feeling crept in. She watched the women weave, their fingers flying over the loom, creating patterns of stunning beauty. She watched the men with the horses, speaking to them in low murmurs, moving with them as one. This was not savagery. This was a life she could not comprehend, a life lived in harmony with the earth she had only ever seen as an enemy. She was mesmerized by their freedom. She did not know how much time passed. One day, or perhaps 2, she slept by the stream, and a woman silently left her a blanket and a bowl of corn mush. She ate it gratefully. Kohana emerged from the hogan. He was leaning on a stick, but he was walking. His leg was wrapped in a poultice of green leaves. He looked pale, but his eyes were clear. He walked to her. Evelyn stood, wiping her hands on her torn skirt. She did not know what to say. "Are you better?" He nodded. He studied her face, the dark bruise on her cheek, the cut on her lip. "You are not like the others," he said. "I do not know what I am anymore," she whispered, looking at the ground. He waited until she looked up. "In the white man's sick house, in the dark. Your hands, they were light. You brought water. You stopped the fire in my leg." He looked at her hair, which had come loose from its pins and was shining in the sun. "We will call you Tayen." "Tayen," she repeated. He nodded. "It means she who brings the light. It is a strong name." Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes. Her own people wanted her dead. His people saw her as the enemy. But this man, this warrior from a world of smoke and stone, had given her a new name, a name that meant light. She was standing between two impossible worlds, and she did not know where she belonged. But she knew, with a certainty that frightened her, that she could not go back. The name Tayen did not make Evelyn Carter a new person. It did not make the old woman, Shiyazi, trust her. It did not stop the children from staring at her as if she were a ghost who had wandered into the sunlight. She was still white. She was still an outcast. The Navajo people tolerated her presence only because Kohana had willed it. He was healing, his body slowly knitting itself back together with the help of the medicine man's chants and the earth-based poultices Shiyaji applied. Evelyn was given the task of grinding corn. She knelt for hours, rocking the grinding stone back and forth, her hands blistering and then hardening. It was simple, back-breaking work, and she was grateful for it. It kept her from thinking. When she was not grinding corn or hauling water from the stream, she watched Kohana. He was teaching the young boys how to fletch arrows, his hands moving with a fluid economy she found beautiful. He rarely spoke to her, but she often felt his gaze on her, assessing, watchful. The fragile peace of the hidden valley lasted for 8 days. On the 9th day, a rider appeared on the high ridge. He was not a soldier. He was a Navajo scout, his horse lathered and breathing hard. He slid from his mount and spoke rapidly to the small council of elders, Kohana among them. Evelyn could not understand the words, but she understood the tone. It was urgent. It was full of fear. The women stopped their weaving, their hands still on the looms. Kohana's face became a mask of cold fury. His hand went to the knife at his belt. When the council broke, he walked directly to her. "You must go," he said, his voice flat. "Go where what has happened. The town, Silver Mesa, more soldiers have come. They have a new leader." He paused, his eyes searching her face. "They are clearing the mesas. They call it a rebellion. They say a white woman was taken. They are using you as their excuse to burn everything." A cold dread settled in Evelyn's stomach, colder than the stream water. Who is the new leader?" "A lieutenant," the scout said, stepping forward. He was a young man with sharp eyes. "He is asking for you. He says your name. Gaines. Lieutenant Robert Gaines." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. She sat down hard on the ground. The cornmeal forgotten. Robert, not Robert. He was from her old life, a life before her husband, a life in a green, civilized world back east. He was the man she had been expected to marry, the man whose polite exterior hid a will of iron and a cruelty she had only seen glimpses of. He was ambitious. He saw the world as a thing to be conquered and owned, and he had never, ever liked to lose. "You know him," Kohana stated. It was not a question. "Yes," she whispered, her hands shaking. "I knew him. A long time ago, before I was married." Kohana looked at the scout, then back at her. The understanding in his eyes was instant and complete. "Your man." "No, not my man. Never." She looked up at him, desperate for him to believe her. "He is a hard man, Kohana. He is not like the others. He will not stop. He will not be reasonable. He wants everything to be his. He uses your name to make war." "Shiyazi, the old woman," said, her voice full of contempt. She had approached, silent as a shadow. "You are bad luck. You brought the soldiers here. You must leave. You will lead them away." "Where can I go?" Evelyn cried. "They will kill me, or he will take me. You do not understand. He will not let me go." "That is not our concern," the old woman said, turning her back. "I will take her," Kohana said. The old woman spun around. "No, you are still weak. Your leg is not healed. Your place is here, to fight for your people." "She saved my life," Kohana said, his voice quiet but unbending. "I will not let her be taken. I will not let them use her name to kill us. I will take her north, to the Ute lands. They will not follow her there. Then I will return." "She is a white woman," an elder protested. "She is Tayan," Kohana replied, ending the argument. He looked down at Evelyn. "Get what you have. We leave when the moon is dark." She had nothing. The blanket they had given her, the moccasins a woman had silently left by her sleeping place. They left that night, two shadows slipping out of the peaceful valley. Kohana set a hard pace, moving north into the high, broken desert. He was no longer the confident guide. He was a man being hunted, his head constantly turning, listening to the wind. Evelyn's terror returned. They were in the open now, in the vast, unforgiving land. The soldiers were behind them, and Robert was leading them. He would not stop. He would track her with the tenacity of a starving wolf. For 3 days, they moved across a landscape of red rock and cracked earth. The sun was a physical weight, pressing down on them, stealing the moisture from their bodies. They spoke little, saving their breath for the climb. Kohana's limp grew more pronounced. He showed her how to find water, a few precious, muddy drops, by digging in the sand of a dry riverbed. He showed her which plants were edible, and which would kill her. On the 4th day, they saw the dust cloud. It was far to the south, but it was moving fast. A patrol. "This way," Kohana said, his voice urgent. He pulled her into a narrow slit in a canyon wall, a space barely wide enough for one person. They pressed themselves back into the rock, the sandstone rough against Evelyn's cheek. She could hear the jingle of harnesses, the low, careless talk of the soldiers. They passed the mouth of the crevice without seeing them. Evelyn held her breath for so long she thought her lungs would burst. She was pressed against Kohana, his body a solid, warm wall in front of her. She could feel the steady, slow beat of his heart against her shoulder. It was calm. He was not afraid. After the soldiers passed, they did not move for a long time. When they finally stepped back out into the sun, Kohana looked at her. "You are learning," he said. "You did not make a sound." That night, a storm blew in. The wind howled, a high-pitched scream that drove sand into everything. The air became a thick, stinging cloud of red dust. They could not see, could not breathe. Kohana found a shallow overhang, barely a scoop in the rock, and pushed her into it. He crouched in front of her, his blanket held up to shield them from the worst of the blast. They stayed like that for hours, the world reduced to the roar of the wind and the grit of sand in their teeth. Evelyn was cold, colder than she had ever been. She was pressed against him, huddled under the blanket. She was no longer just his companion. She was his charge. He was protecting her with his own body. The intimacy of it was more profound than a touch. When the wind finally died, the land was changed. The stars were brilliant, sharp as chips of ice. Kohana moved, his body stiff. He groaned, a low sound of pain. "Your leg," Evelyn said, her voice hoarse from the dust. "It is nothing." It is not nothing. In the pale starlight, she could see the dark stain spreading on his legging. The forced march, the storm. His wound was open again. "We must find shelter. We must clean it." He argued. but his voice was weak. She saw a dark opening in the rock face not 20 yards away. A small cave the storm had uncovered. There. She helped him, her shoulder under his arm. Inside, it was still, almost warm. It smelled of dry rock. Kohana sank to the floor. Evelyn, her terror replaced by a nurse's resolve, said, "Make a fire, a small one. I must see the wound." He used a fire drill, his hands moving with practiced speed, and soon a small, smokeless fire of dry mesquite twigs crackled between them. The light was dim, flickering. "You called me Tayen," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Let me do what the name means. Let me help you." He looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded, his face grim. "The dressing, it is ruined." The Navajo poultice was a shredded, bloody mess. The wound beneath it was inflamed, angry. "I have to clean it," she said. "This fire is not enough light. And your shirt, it is in the way." He hesitated. His shirt was his protection, his covering. She saw the pride in his face. "Please," she whispered. He turned his back to her and slowly, stiffly, pulled the buckskin shirt over his head. Evelyn drew in a sharp breath. The firelight played across the skin of his back. It was the color of burnished copper, smooth and taut over the lean, hard muscles. She saw the lines of his shoulders, the strength in his neck. This was not the broken prisoner from the infirmary cot. This was a man. She had tended to many men, soldiers and miners, but their pale, often scarred bodies had meant nothing to her. This was different. This was beauty, raw and elemental, like the land itself. He shifted, turning to give her better access to his leg, and the light caught his chest. She saw it then, a scar, high on his left side, near the collarbone. It was not a bullet wound. It was old, puckered, a deliberate mark. Her fingers, which had been so steady, trembled. She reached out, not as a nurse, but as a woman, and lightly touched the raised skin. "What is this?" His body tensed at her touch, but he did not pull away. "A memory," he said, his voice low. "From a battle?" "From your people." He looked into the fire. "When I was a boy, they came, the soldiers. They burned our fields. They killed our sheep. They made us walk. 300 miles, to Bosque Redondo, the Long Walk, they called it." His voice was devoid of emotion, a simple telling of a terrible fact. "We were in a camp. There was not enough food, much sickness. A soldier. He did not like the way I looked at him. He put his hot rifle barrel here." He touched the scar. "To teach me respect." Evelyn felt a wave of sickness and shame. She pulled her hand back as if she had been burned. "Robert, the man who is hunting us, he believes in that. He believes you must all be taught respect or be removed." "He will not teach me," Kohana said. Evelyn looked at him, truly looked at him, and her civilized world cracked. The conflict that had been tearing at her, the choice between her duty as an American citizen and her growing feelings, suddenly seemed absurd. What duty did she owe to a people who did this, who burned and branded and called it progress? Her shame was replaced by a cold anger. She tore a clean strip from her own petticoat, the last remnant of her old life. "I will not let him take you. I will not let him take me." She began to clean his wound. Her hands were gentle, but sure. She worked with a focus she had not felt in days. The air in the small cave was thick, charged with their proximity. He did not flinch, did not make a sound. He just watched her face, his black eyes unreadable in the firelight. She was acutely, painfully aware of his bare skin, of the warmth radiating from him, of the simple, undeniable fact of his body. So close to hers. She felt a deep, primitive pull, a dangerous tide rising in her. This was the man her world had forbidden, and he was the only thing in her life that felt real. They traveled for 2 more days, pushing north, The land was changing, rising toward a high pass. They were weak, starving, but the border was close. The Ute territory. Safety. They reached the crest of the pass at sunset. The world fell away below them. A vast expanse of purple canyons. Far in the distance, a silver ribbon snaked through the land. "The river," Kohana said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "We are close." Evelyn felt a wild, impossible surge of hope. They had made it. "Evelyn." The voice was crisp, clear, and educated. It was not Kohana. It echoed from the rocks above them. Evelyn froze. She knew that voice better than her own. She looked up. On a ridge not 50 feet above them, silhouetted against the dying sun, sat Lieutenant Robert Gaines. He was on a large black horse, his blue uniform immaculate. He was smiling. 6 soldiers, their rifles at the ready, were arrayed on either side of him. "I knew you would run to him, my dear," Robert said, his voice conversational, as if they were meeting in a Boston drawing room. "You always did have a taste for the dramatic." Kohana had his knife in his hand, his body tensed. He was too weak. They were too exposed. "Robert, no," Evelyn said, taking a step forward. "Stay where you are, Evelyn." His smile vanished. His voice became as cold as the high desert air. "You have caused a terrible mess, but I am here to fix it. I am taking you back to Silver Mesa. We will tell everyone this savage kidnapped you, that he forced you." "I will not go with you," Evelyn said, her voice shaking but hard. She moved to stand beside Kohana. "I am not your prisoner." Robert's face darkened. "You are a white woman," he hissed. "An officer's widow. You will not shame your people, and you will not shame me." He looked at Kohana for the first time, his eyes filled with contempt. "As for this animal, he will be made an example of." He motioned to his men. "Seize them." The soldiers started down the slope, their boots slipping on the loose rock. Kohana knew they were finished. He knew he could not fight. He looked at Evelyn. Her face was pale, but her eyes were defiant. She was Tayen. He did not hesitate. He grabbed her and shoved her, hard, toward the steep, rocky slope that fell away toward the river. "Run! Tayen!" he roared, the Navajo word for run. He turned back. He grabbed a heavy rock, the only weapon he had, and charged up the slope, directly at the soldiers. It was not a fight. It was a sacrifice. He was buying her seconds. He crashed into the first 2 men, his momentum carrying them all down in a heap. A rifle butt slammed into the side of his head. He fell and did not move. "No!" Evelyn screamed. She had stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the slope. She was frozen, watching them swarm him. Robert was by her side in an instant. He grabbed her arm, his fingers biting into her skin. "How very dramatic!" he spat, his face pale with fury. "He saved you the trouble of deciding—" He began to drag her back up the slope. "You will come with me. You will be my wife, and you will watch as I bring law to this godless land." His men were tying the unconscious Kohana, his hands and feet bound. They slung him over a horse like a sack of grain. Evelyn did not fight. She was numb. Robert pulled her onto his own horse. In front of him, his arm around her waist like a band of steel. The last thing she saw as they rode away from the pass was Kohana's face, bloody and still, his black hair dragging in the dust. She was a prisoner once more, but this time her jailer had a familiar face. The ride back to Silver Mesa was a silent agony. Evelyn Carter sat in front of Robert Gaines on his horse, her back rigid against his chest, his arm an iron bar around her waist. She was a thing he had recaptured, a possession that had tried to escape. He spoke to her, his voice a low, proprietary murmur against her ear, telling her of his plans, of the order he was bringing, of the house he would build for her. He was explaining how her foolish, feminine adventure was now over. She did not hear the words. She heard only the sound of his voice, the civilized tone that masked a bottomless void. Her mind was fixed on the image of Kohana, unconscious, slung over a horse, his head bumping with a sickening loose rhythm. They did not ride into the town. The town, she now saw, was dwarfed by the new military fort that had sprung up on the mesa above it. It was no longer a simple outpost. It was a statement, a sprawling, raw timber fortress, the American flag hanging limp in the windless air. They rode through the main gate. Soldiers, sharp and clean in their blue uniforms, snapped to attention. Robert was clearly in command. This was his kingdom. They stopped in a dusty parade ground. He dismounted and pulled her down, his hands lingering on her waist. "Corporal," Robert called, his voice sharp. "Put the prisoner in the stockade. He is to be given water, but no food. I will question him personally tomorrow." 2 soldiers cut Kohana free and dragged him, his feet trailing in the dust, toward a small, windowless wooden box in the corner of the compound. He was conscious. As they hauled him past, he raised his head. His face was a mask of caked blood and red dust. He looked at Evelyn. His eyes were not defeated. They were black, burning holes of absolute hatred. He looked at her as Robert's hands held her, and in that look, she saw her own betrayal. Then the heavy door of the stockade slammed shut. "Come, my dear," Robert said, steering her toward the officer's quarters. "You are exhausted. You need a bath and a proper bed." His quarters were a shocking island of Eastern civilization. There was a thick carpet, a mahogany desk, and glass-paned windows. He poured 2 glasses of brandy. He handed one to her. Her hand did not shake. She had gone past shaking. "You have been through a terrible ordeal, Evelyn," he said, his voice soft. "But you are safe now." She looked at him over the rim of the glass. "What is your story, Robert?" He smiled, a thin, tight smile. "The story is simple. You were taken, against your will, by the savage Kohana. You were brutalized. Of course, in my duty as an officer and as a man who has cared for you for a long time, led the patrol that rescued you. It is a miracle we'd found you in time." "Brutalized," she repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Of course," he said, swirling his brandy. "A woman alone with such an animal for more than a week. Your reputation is ruined, Evelyn, utterly, as a soldier's widow. You know what that means in a place like this. You are compromised." He set his glass down and took hers, placing them both on the desk. He took her hands. His were clean, his nails perfectly trimmed. "There is only one solution," he said, his voice dropping to a tone of feigned sincerity. "I will do my duty. I will protect your honor. We will be married, at once." Evelyn looked into his pale blue eyes. She saw the ambition. She saw the possessiveness. He was not protecting her. He was annexing her. Just as he was annexing this land. The frightened woman who had lived in the small cabin by the canyon was gone. The desert had burned her away. In her place was Tyen, a woman who had seen true strength and who now saw the pathetic, dangerous posturing of a hollow man. She let her shoulders slump. She let a tear, a real one, born of fury and despair, slide down her cheek. "Robert," she whispered, letting her voice break. You would still have me after what he did." His grip on her hands tightened. He had won. "My dear, brave Evelyn, it is because of what you endured. It is my duty to restore you. I am so broken," she managed, lowering her eyes. "I do not know if I can be a wife to anyone right now. I am so ashamed." She looked up, her eyes wide with a carefully crafted plea. "Please, Robert, give me a few days. Let me feel useful again. I am still a nurse. Let me work in the fort hospital, just tending to the men. It will make me feel clean again. Please." He studied her. He saw a broken, grateful creature. "Of course, my dear, that is a fine, noble idea. It will show the town you are a victim, not a collaborator." He smiled. "You will work, you will recover, and in 1 week we will be married. The post chaplain will officiate." He gave her a small room, adjoining his, with a soldier posted outside the door. She was his honored guest and his absolute prisoner. The next day, she began her work. The fort hospital was cleaner than the town infirmary, but it smelled the same, of sickness and fear. The soldiers she tended were polite, but their eyes followed her, whispering. She was the woman who had been with the Navajo, the wives of the other officers, who gathered for tea in the afternoons, did not speak to her. She was a pariah, saved only by the lieutenant's patronage. She played her part. She was quiet, somber, and efficient. She spoke to Robert each evening, thanking him for his protection. She was biding her time. She had to see Kohana. She had to know if he was alive. On the 3rd day, she was told to bring supplies to Robert's office. He was in a meeting with his sergeants. She entered the room, and her blood ran cold. Spread across his desk, held down by rocks, was a large, detailed map. It was the territory she had just crossed, the hidden canyons, the mesas, and there, circled in thick, red ink, was a canyon she recognized, the canyon of the cottonwood trees, Kohana's home. At the top of the map, in Robert's neat, precise hand, were the words Operation Red Hill Purge. She stared, her heart pounding. It was not just a patrol. It was a full campaign. She saw lists of troop numbers, supply routes, and a notation for 2 Gatling guns. It was a plan for a massacre. The date at the bottom of the order was for 2 days from now. They were moving out at dawn tomorrow. She backed out of the room, her mind racing. She had to warn them, but how she was watched every moment. She could not escape. She thought of the fire, of the smoke, of the chance. She thought of the Navajo. She had to find one. She remembered seeing a small, wretched encampment outside the fort's south wall. A few Navajo, mostly women and children, who had been rounded up for their own protection. She had to get to them. She went to the hospital's head surgeon. "Doctor," she said, her voice full of false concern, "I am worried about the natives camped outside, the lack of sanitation. If cholera or dysentery breaks out, it will spread to the fort in a day. I must go and inspect them, set up a clean zone." The surgeon, a man who feared disease more than bullets, agreed immediately. "Take a guard, and do not touch any of them." She walked to the camp, a young corporal 10 paces behind her. It was a place of despair. The people were huddled in rags, their faces blank. And then she saw her, sitting by a dead fire, her back straight, was Sheyazi. Evelyn dismissed the guard. "Wait for me at the edge of the camp. I do not want to frighten them." The soldier, happy to be away from the smell, nodded. Evelyn walked to the old woman. Sheyazi looked up. Her eyes were as hard and empty as the rocks. "You," the old woman said. "They are going to kill you," Evelyn said, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "All of you, in the hidden valley." The old woman's expression did not change. "You are his woman now. You sleep in the soldier's bed. You lie." "I do not," Evelyn hissed, her own anger rising. She knelt in the dust, grabbing the old woman's arm. "I am a prisoner. He wants to marry me. Kohana is in the stockade. He will be hanged. He saved me. He gave himself up for me." Sheyazi's eyes flickered, searching Evelyn's face. She saw the bruise on her cheek, the desperation, the fury. She saw the truth. She saw Tayen. "They have a map." Evelyn rushed on. "They call it the Red Hill Purge. They ride out at dawn tomorrow. With many guns. They will slaughter everyone. The children, the women, everyone." The old woman was very still. "What do you want, white woman?" "Teach me," Evelyn begged. "The smoke, how to warn them. I do not know how." Sheyazi looked past her, at the fort at the soldier. She made a decision. She pulled Evelyn behind a tattered blanket that served as a wall. A small fire smoldered there, used for cooking. "The wind is from the south," the old woman said, her voice quick and sharp. "They will see it from the high mesa." She grabbed a piece of damp hide. "You do not have time. Listen, one long smoke, that is watch. 2 short puffs. Soldiers, 3 short puffs. Many soldiers, many guns." She held the hide over the fire, then lifted it quickly. A short, perfect puff of smoke rose. She did it again, and again. 3. This is the signal. This is run and fight. You must send it 3 times, so they know it is real. "The corporal?" Evelyn whispered, her eyes fixed on the rising smoke. "Go," Shuryaji said. "He must not see, but he will smell." The old woman thrust her hand into the cold ashes of the fire and smeared them on Evelyn's apron. "Tell him you are putting out a fire that spread. Tell him the children are careless." Evelyn nodded, her mind clear. "Thank you." "Go, Tayen," the old woman said. "He is one man. We are a people. Do not fail him." Evelyn walked back to the corporal, her heart hammering. "The sanitation is terrible," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "One of their cooking fires spread. I had to put it out." The corporal sniffed. "You reek of smoke, ma'am. The lieutenant will not like that." "It could not be helped," she said, walking past him. She returned to the fort. She was halfway across the parade ground when Robert strode out of his office. He saw her, saw the soot on her apron. His face tightened. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his voice low and sharp. "The native camp," she said, repeating her lie. "I was inspecting for sickness. A fire started. I put it out." He looked at her, his blue eyes cold and probing. He did not believe her. "You smell like a savage yourself," he said, his lip curling. "Go to your room. Bathe. You will dine with me tonight." "Robert, I am tired." "You will dine with me," he repeated, "and you will wear the dress I had brought for you. I ride out on a patrol at dawn, a long patrol. I wish to have a pleasant evening with my fiancée before I go." He was toying with her. He knew she knew. The tension between them was a thin, vibrating wire. She went to her room. She had to escape. Tonight, the patrol. That was the attack. She had to warn them before they rode. That evening, she wore the dress. It was blue silk. It felt like a costume. She sat opposite him at his small table. He was drinking. He talked of his plans, of the final solution to the native problem. He was drunk on his own power. "I will be back in 4 days, my dear," he said, raising his glass. "And when I return, this territory will be clean, and you will be my wife." She had stolen a small bottle of laudanum from the hospital. Her hands were sweating. "You look tired, Robert," she said, her voice a low purr she did not recognize. "It is a big responsibility, all this." "It is," he said, puffing out his chest. "Let me pour you another drink," she said. She stood, took his glass. Her back was to him. With a steady hand, she poured the whiskey and emptied half the bottle of laudanum into it. The dark liquid hid the opiate. She brought him the glass. "To your success, Robert, to our future." He smiled, his eyes on her. "To us." He drank it all. She sat, her heart in her throat, and talked. She talked about Boston, about people they knew, about anything. She watched his eyes. After 10 minutes, they grew heavy. After 15, his speech began to slur. "Evelyn," he said, trying to focus. You look so beautiful, but—" "Rest, Robert," she whispered, taking the glass from his slack hand. "Rest before your long ride." He slumped forward, his head hitting the table. He was unconscious. She did not wait. She ran to his office and stole the map. She took his extra pistol, the The small one he kept in his desk. She took a knife from the kitchen, a bag, and filled it with dried beef and hardtack. She did not go out the door. The guard was still there. She went to the window. It was a 10-foot drop to the dark alley behind the officers' quarters. She did not hesitate. She threw the bag out, then climbed out, lowering herself until she was hanging by her fingertips. She let go. She landed hard, twisting her ankle, but the pain was a distant thing. She was free. She scrambled to her feet and ran, a shadow in the silk dress. She did not run toward the main gate. She ran toward the dark, high cliffs that overlooked the fort. She had to find a high place. She had to make a fire. She had to send 3 puffs of smoke. The silk dress was a mockery. Evelyn Carter ran, and the fine blue fabric made for Boston parlors tore on the sandstone and the grasping thorns. Her ankles screamed with every step. A sharp, white fire. The 10-foot drop from Robert's window had not broken the bone, but it had come close. She pushed the pain down. It did not matter. She scrambled up the cliff face behind the fort, the bag heavy on her shoulder, the cold butt of Robert's pistol pressed against her waist. She was a nurse. She was a widow. She realized with a strange, cold clarity, a fugitive. She found the ledge she had seen from her old cabin, a high, flat space overlooking the entire valley. The fort, a child's collection of blocks below. The alarm had not sounded. Not yet. Robert was still asleep, his face on his mahogany desk, dreaming of conquest. Her hands, the hands of a healer, were clumsy. She gathered dry brush, piling it. She found the matches she had taken from Robert's desk. The flame flared, shockingly bright in the darkness. She fed it twigs, then larger branches, until she had a steady, low fire. Now, she remembered Shiayazi's lesson. She needed dampness. She had no hide. She grabbed handfuls of the living, resinous green brush growing in the crevices. She piled it on the flames. The fire hissed, and a thick, pungent white smoke began to pour into the still night air. She used the heavy canvas bag she had stolen. It was awkward, heavy. She held it over the smoke, her eyes smarting, her lungs burning. She counted. 1, 2, 3. She lifted it. A perfect, thick puff of smoke rose, climbing straight up. She waited. 1, 2, 3. She smothered it again, lifted, a second puff. She heard a shout from the fort, a sentry. "On the ridge! Look! Smoke!" She had no time. She smothered the fire, held it. 1, 2, 3. She lifted, the third puff. She repeated the sequence, her movements desperate. 3 short puffs. She waited, then did it again. 3 puffs, 3 times. The signal, run and fight. Lights were moving in the fort now. A bugle call, sharp and ugly. Split the night, the alarm. "Evil," a voice roared from below. Robert, he was awake. He had found the window. He could not have seen her, not clearly, but he knew. Evelyn did not wait. She kicked the fire apart, scattering the embers over the rock. She grabbed her bag and ran. She did not run back toward the town. She ran north, deeper into the high, broken country, the stolen map afolded, sharp promise in her pocket. She ran all night. Her ankle was a club of blunt agony, but she did not stop. When the first pale gray light of dawn touched the sky, she found a hollow between 2 boulders and collapsed. She pulled the map free. Her hands were shaking. She spread it on the ground. Robert's neat, red ink circle, Red Hill. She knew the direction. She tore a strip from the hem of the silk dress, the last good part, and bound her ankle, pulling the knot so tight she gasped. She ate a piece of the stolen hardtack. It tasted like sawdust, but it was fuel. She hid, sleeping in fits, the pistol in her hand. The sun climbed, hot and merciless. She was alone, in the wilderness, hunted. She was terrified, but she was not the same woman. The fear was a cold, clean thing now, a whetstone that sharpened her senses. When dusk came, she moved again. The land was her enemy, but it was also her only friend. She followed the map, moving from shadow to shadow, her eyes on the stars. She remembered Kohana pointing them out, the hunter, the ones that do not move. She was following his stars. She traveled for a full day, her world reduced to rock, thirst, and pain. The silk dress was ribbons, her skin beneath it scratched and bleeding. She was weakening. She knew she could not last another night. Late on the second night, she stumbled into a narrow canyon. She was following the map, but she was lost. She leaned against the rock wall, her breath coming in sobs. She had failed. She had sent the signal, but she would die here. A stone clicked, somewhere in the darkness above her. Evelyn froze. She pulled the pistol from her belt, her hand trembling. "Who is there?" she called, her voice a dry rasp. There was silence. Then, a low, soft call, the cry of a nighthawk. Once, twice. Her heart stopped. She had heard that call before, in the hidden valley. Kohana had used it to call the horse guards. It was a signal. She lowered the pistol. She tried to make the sound, but her throat was too dry. She whistled, a low, weak imitation. A shadow detached itself from the rock face 20 yards away. It was not Kohana. It was a young man, lean and quick, armed with a bow. He was one of the Navajo scouts. He looked at her, at the ruined dress, the pale, streaked face. "Tayan?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief. "Yes," she whispered. "I am Tayan." "I am Kay," he said. "Shiyazi sent me. We saw the signal. We have been searching." "Kohana," Evelyn choked out. Did they—" "He is free," Kay said, a faint smile touching his lips. "The old woman is wise. She gave a knife to a boy who brought the prisoner water. He was gone before the soldiers even knew you had fled. He is waiting." Relief so profound it was like a physical blow made her legs buckle. She slid down the rock face. Waiting where? "He is hurt," Kay said. "His leg. The escape was not easy. He is at the sacred place, the water that heals." He came forward and offered her a small canteen. The water was warm, but it was the most beautiful thing she had ever tasted. "Come, I will take you." He led her. He was a ghost. He moved without sound. She followed, her pain forgotten, her hope a wild, drumming beat in her chest. They climbed for another hour, up a steep, narrow trail she would never have found. The air grew warmer, and she smelled it. The faint, sharp scent of sulfur, of steam. Kay stopped at the mouth of a dark cave, a fissure in the mountain. A thick, white mist pulsed from it, warm against her cold skin. "He is here," Kay said. "He heals." The scout melted back into the shadows, leaving her alone. Evelyn stood before the cave. She was a ruin. She was covered in dirt, in blood. The blue silk was a filthy rag. She was a white woman, carrying a soldier's gun, coming to a sacred Navajo place. She looked at her hands, raw and dirty. She could not just walk in. She raised her hand and knocked softly on the stone wall of the cave entrance. A voice came from within, a calm, low rumble that vibrated through the stone and into her bones. It was his voice. "Come in." She stepped out of the cold night and into the warm, swirling steam. The cave was large, the walls slick and dark. The air was thick. In the center, a large pool of water steamed, the surface like black glass. A single shaft of bright moonlight fell from a natural opening in the ceiling, cutting the mist, illuminating the center of the pool. He was there. He was sitting in the water, his back to her. She saw the powerful lines of his shoulders, his black hair wet and heavy, plastered to his skin. He was healing. He turned, his movement slow, rippling the water. The moonlight caught him. He was bare. The water covered him to his waist. but she saw the flat, hard planes of his stomach, the scar high on his chest, the line of his collarbone. His face was calm. He was not surprised. He was not angry. And the bare Navajo in the steaming bath just smiled. It was not the ghost of a smile she had seen before. It was a real, slow smile of profound relief. Evelyn stopped, her breath catching. She was suddenly, painfully aware of her torn dress, of the filth on her skin, of the pistol at her waist. She was the savage here. She was the broken thing. "Tayan," he said. His voice was the sound of the warm water, of the deep earth. "Kohana," she whispered. I thought you were in the stockade. I thought—" "She-Yazi," he said, his voice quiet. "She is a fox. The soldiers are children. They left a boy to guard me. The knife was in the water bucket." He looked at her, his eyes traveling over her, seeing the bruises, the torn dress, the exhaustion. "You set the signal." "I did. 3 puffs, 3 times. Did they see?" "They saw," he said. "The valley is being emptied. The warriors are ready. But you—" He frowned, his gaze settling on her ankle. "You are hurt, and you are cold." "My ankle, I jumped from a window." "Robert Gaines," he said, his voice flat. "Yes, I drugged him. I took his map." He absorbed this. He did not seem surprised by that, either. "Come," he said, gesturing to the pool. "The water. It is from the mother. It heals." She hesitated. The whole world, her whole life, was in that hesitation. She was Evelyn Carter, a white woman, a widow. He was a Navajo man. He was naked. The steam swirled between them, a shifting, restless barrier. "I cannot," she whispered. "Look at me. I am—" "You are Tayan," he said, his voice gentle, but with a core of command. "You are not his. You are not a prisoner. Come." She looked at his face, calm and strong in the moonlight. She looked at the steaming water. She had not been clean, had not been warm, in what felt like a lifetime. Her hands moved. She unbuckled the belt. The pistol and the knife clattered to the stone floor. She looked down at the ruined silk, the symbol of her other life. Kohana saw her hesitation. He turned his back to her, a simple, profound gesture of respect. He gave her the privacy of the steam and the shadows. Evelyn pulled the rags of the dress over her head. She let them fall to the floor. She was naked now, her pale skin covered in scratches, her body trembling. She stepped to the edge of the pool and put one foot into the water. The heat was a shock. It was a living thing. It sank into her very bones, and she gasped. It was not just heat. It was cleansing. It was washing away the fort, the fear, the grime. It was washing away Robert. She slid into the water, the black, silken heat enveloping her. She sank to her chin, the steam rising around her face. She felt the tension, the pain, the terror of the last few days simply dissolve. He turned back to face her. They were 10 feet apart. 2 human beings, their bodies hidden by the dark water, their faces visible in the strange, pure moonlight. The steam rose, blurring the lines, blurring the world. "I have his plan," she said, her voice shaking, but not from cold. "He has guns, 2 Gatling guns. He plans to kill everyone." "I know," he said. "We will stop him." He moved through the water toward her, not with menace, but with a slow, deliberate grace. She did not move. She did not breathe. He stopped, close enough to touch. She could see the water beating on his shoulders. "Your ankle," he said. "It is better. The water." "Let me see." She lifted her foot. He took it in his hands. His hands were warm, the skin slightly rough, his grip firm and impersonal. He gently probed the swollen joint with his strong fingers. His touch was sure. It was a healer's touch. "It is not broken," he said, his voice low. The skin is torn, but the bone is good." He held her foot in his hand. She looked down at his head, his black hair, at the way the moonlight shone on his wet skin. She saw the scar on his chest, the one the soldier had given him. Her hand, clean now, rose from the water. She reached out. She touched it. Her fingers traced the puckered, angry flesh. His breath caught. His hand released her ankle. He covered her hand with his own, pressing her palm flat against the scar. His heart was beating, strong and fast, beneath her hand. She looked up at his face. He was looking at her, and his eyes were not the eyes of a warrior, or a prisoner, or a healer. They were the eyes of a man. The steam veiled them, but she saw the fire behind the veil. "Tyen," he whispered. It was not a name. It was a plea. He leaned forward, his movement as slow and inevitable as the rising steam. She did not pull away. She did not close her eyes. She watched him come. His lips touched hers. It was not a kiss of passion. It was not the clumsy, demanding kiss of Robert Gaines. It was a kiss of finding. It was slow and warm and tasted of the earth, of the deep, hot water. It was a kiss of silence, of a story that needed no words. He was accepting all of it. Her fear, her betrayal, her small, desperate courage. She kissed him back, the last wall inside her, the last civilized, frightened part of her, crumbled. This was not sin. This was not betrayal. This was home. This was the only thing that had ever been true. He pulled back, his forehead resting against hers. They were in their own world, a small, warm world of steam and moonlight. "I thought you were his prisoner," he breathed. "I thought you were dead," she whispered. They stayed like that, their hands still joined over his heart. After a long time, the cold night air began to creep in. "We must get out," he said, his voice thick. He led her from the pool, handing her a dry, woven blanket that had been waiting on a rock. He wrapped one around himself. They sat on the floor of the cave, their backs to the warm stone, the steam wrapping them. Evelyn felt no shame. She felt no fear. She felt an iron resolve. She pulled the map from her bag. It was damp, but intact. She spread it on the rock between them. "Robert rides at dawn. He will be at the canyon by tomorrow's dawn." "The warriors are waiting," Kohana said, his finger tracing the red line of the attack. "But here, this ridge, this is where he will put the guns. They can fire down into the valley. Our men will be slaughtered before the fight even begins." "We have to stop them," she said. "We will." "We, Kohana, I am not a fighter." He looked at her, his face serious in the dim light. "You drugged their chief. You stole his war plan. You set the signal fire. You crossed the desert alone, with a bad ankle, to bring this warning." He picked up the pistol she had dropped and handed it to her. "You are a warrior. Tyen, you just have a different way of fighting." She took the gun. It was heavy in her hand. "We will be killed," she said. It was a statement, not a question. "Perhaps," he said, holding her gaze. "It is a good day to die." She looked at him, this man of stone and fire. She felt a surge of love so powerful, so deep. It eclipsed the fear. It eclipsed everything. "If we must die," she said, her voice steady, "let us at least live tonight as free people." A slow smile touched his lips. He understood. This was not a forbidden love to be hidden. This was a liberating love, a love to fight for, to die for. He stood and pulled her to her feet. He was a warrior again. "We rest for 1 hour, then we ride. I have horses hidden in the next canyon. We must beat Robert to the Red Hill." He squeezed her hand, his grip like iron. "We must save our people." She stood beside him, wrapped in a Navajo blanket, her husband's civilized world in ashes behind her. "Our people," she repeated. The word was right. Dawn broke over the Red Hill, not as a gentle promise, but as a bleeding wound. The sky was a pale, sick gray, turning to a fiery, bloody crimson as the sun's first rays hit the high cliffs. Evelyn Carter stood beside Kohana on the ridge overlooking the hidden valley. They had ridden hard, the two horses he had hidden moving like shadows through the night. Her ankle throbbed, a dull bass note beneath the high, thin scream of her nerves. Below them, the valley was quiet, too quiet. The hogans were empty. The horses were gone. From this high up, she could see the preparations. Boulders were wedged, ready to be rolled. Warriors, their bodies painted with the colors of the earth, were hidden in the rocks, becoming part of the canyon itself. They were not just warriors. They were fathers, husbands, and sons, preparing to defend their home. Then they heard it. Not a sound, but a vibration. The distant, rhythmic clink of metal on stone. The jingle of harnesses. The low, muffled commands of men who thought they were masters of this land. Evelyn looked north, up the canyon entrance. A column of blue, like a slow-moving snake, was winding its way in. At its head, unmistakable on his tall black horse, was Lieutenant Robert Gaines. He rode as if he were on a parade ground, his back straight, his authority absolute. Behind him, she counted, more than 60 men, and worse. She saw the two mule teams, dragging the heavy, canvas-wrapped shapes of the Gatling guns. "They are here," she whispered, her voice a dry crackle. Kohana nodded. He put his hand on her shoulder, his grip firm. "Your place is here," he said, pointing to a spot on the ridge, slightly lower, that overlooked the wide, flat area where he knew Robert would deploy the guns. "The warriors will keep them busy. You must stop the dragon wagons. Do not let them sing." He looked into her eyes. The man from the hot springs, the man of fire and steam, was gone. This was the warrior, his face a mask of cold resolve, but his eyes still held her. "Do not be afraid. Tayen, you are the heart of the people now. Fight for that heart." "Kohana," she began, her throat tight with a love and a fear so tangled she could not separate them. He silenced her, not with a kiss, but by pressing his fingertips to her lips. "Live," he said, just that one word. Then he was gone, slipping down the rock face as silently as a lizard. His wounded leg showing no sign of weakness. He was a part of the stone, a part of the fight, moving to join his men. Evelyn was alone. She checked Robert's pistol. 6 bullets. She had stolen a small box of ammunition from his desk. She reloaded, her fingers surprisingly steady. She was no longer Evelyn Carter, the nurse who fainted at the sight of too much blood. She was a woman who had drugged a lieutenant, stolen his war plan, and crossed a desert. She was Tayen. She crawled on her belly to the spot Kohana had shown her. It was a good position, a small nest of rocks that gave her a clear view of the flat shelf below, perhaps 70 yards away. She waited. The air was cold, but she was not. She was burning. Robert's column entered the valley. He raised his hand. The soldiers stopped. "Sergeant!" She heard his clear voice echo in the still air. "Deploy the guns. Right there. I want a clean field of fire on that village." A detachment of 6 men broke off, manhandling one of the heavy guns onto the shelf she was watching. They unlimbered it, their movements practiced. They pointed its ugly, multi-barreled snout directly at the empty hogans. The other gun was being set up further down, covering the canyon's only exit. Robert was thorough. He was not just defeating them, he was bagging them. Robert sat on his horse, waiting. He expected the Navajo to be asleep, to be surprised. He raised his hand, about to give the signal to fire. A single, high-pitched cry split the dawn. It came from Kohana, from a high rock. And the valley exploded. It was not a battle. It was a chaotic, brutal eruption. Warriors rose from the ground itself. Boulders, released from above, crashed down into the column of soldiers, scattering them, breaking the line. Horses screamed, rearing and falling. Rifles cracked from 100 hidden places. The soldiers, caught in the open, were confused. They tried to form a defensive square, their training taking over, but they were being shot from all sides. The 6 men at the Gatling gun were distracted. They turned, firing their rifles down into the main skirmish, ignoring their primary weapon. This was her chance. Evelyn stood. She raised the pistol with both hands, just as Robert had taught her so long ago. She sighted on the man closest to the gun's firing crank. She squeezed the trigger. The explosion was loud, shocking. The man grunted, spun around, and fell. The other 5 soldiers looked up, their faces a mask of confusion. "Where?" "From the rocks," one shouted. Evelyn fired again. Another man fell, clutching his stomach. Now they saw her, a wild-looking woman in the tattered rags of a blue dress, standing on the ridge like a ghost of vengeance. They raised their rifles. Bullets snapped past her head, chipping the rock, stinging her face with stone dust. She dropped behind her cover, reloading, her heart hammering. She peeked out. They were advancing on her, climbing the slope, fanning out. They had left the gun. She had failed. But she had not failed. She had distracted them. As the soldiers scrambled up the rock, 2 Navajo warriors, who had been waiting for this moment, rose from the rocks behind the gun. They had knives. The fight was short, brutal, and silent. The soldiers, focused on the woman above, never saw them. The warriors pushed the heavy Gatling gun over the edge of the cliff. It crashed onto the rocks below, a ruined tangle of brass and steel. Evelyn stood up, her task done, her heart singing a wild, terrible song. The battle raged below. The soldiers were falling back, but they were not broken. Robert was rallying them. He was a good soldier. She had to give him that. His voice was a cold, sharp blade cutting through the chaos, reforming the line. And then he saw her. He was directly below her, his face turned up to the ridge. He saw the ruined gun. He saw her. His face, which had been a mask of command, dissolved. It became the face of the man she had drugged. It became pure, unadulterated hatred. He saw something move to his left. A small group of women and children, who had been hiding in a cave, were trying to flee, to get to the safety of the rocks higher up. They were led by Shi Yazi, a small boy, no older than 7 or 8, tripped and fell, sprawling in the dust. Robert Gaines, Lieutenant of the United States Army, embodiment of the law, turned his horse. He looked at the fallen child. He saw not a boy, he saw a savage. He saw the people who had defied him, the people his fiancée had chosen over him. He drew his service revolver, his face calm and precise. He took aim at the small, terrified boy. "No," Evelyn breathed. She raised her own pistol. It was Robert's pistol. She looked at the man she had once almost married. He was a monster. She fired. The sound was lost in the din of the battle, but the result was not. Robert Gaines stiffened in his saddle. His arm, which had been pointing the pistol, dropped. He looked down, a look of comical, childish surprise on his face, at the small, dark circle that had appeared on the breast of his blue uniform. He looked up at her, his eyes wide. He did not understand. He had been shot. By her. He toppled backward, falling from his horse, his boot catching in the stirrup. His horse, panicked, bolted, dragging him through the dust. Evelyn stood, watching him go. She felt nothing. Not triumph, not regret, just empty. A movement, a flash of blue. Below her, to the right, a soldier, one of Robert's personal guard, had seen his commander fall. He had seen where the shot came from. He was not looking at the Navajo warriors. He was looking at her. He dropped to one knee, a practiced, lethal movement. He raised his rifle. He took careful aim. Evelyn saw him. She was too slow. She was too tired. She tried to raise her pistol. but she knew she would not make it. She closed her eyes, waiting for the impact. A scream. Tie-in. Something hit her, a force so powerful it knocked the breath from her, slamming her back against the rocks. The world went black for a second. The rifle shot echoed, flat and final, in her ears. She opened her eyes. Kohana was on top of her. He had thrown himself from a rock above her, his body covering hers, a human shield. He was not moving. "Kohana," she whispered. "Kohana, get off. You are heavy." He did not move. Kohana. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through the numbness. She pushed at his shoulder. He rolled off her, his movements boneless. He lay on his back, on the red rock, staring up at the red sky. A massive dark stain was spreading across his chest. He had not been hit by the rifle. The soldier had missed. He had been hit by a stray bullet from the chaos below. A bullet that had been meant for no one. A bullet that had been searching for a home and had found the heart of the best man she had ever known. He looked at her. His eyes were clear. There was no pain. There was no fear. He smiled. That same slow smile from the hot springs. "Tie-in," he whispered. His hand, covered in his own blood, rose. He touched her cheek, the place where Hank the miner had hit her. "You are safe." "No!" she screamed. The sound was ripped from her. "No, you cannot! You promised! Live! You said, live!" She pressed her hands to his chest, trying to stop the bleeding. But there was too much. It was everywhere. She was a nurse. She knew a mortal wound when she saw one. "I am," he whispered. "I am living." His eyes held hers. You are my heart." His hand fell from her cheek. His eyes, fixed on her face, lost their focus. The light, the fire, the man who was Kohana, was gone. Evelyn Carter knelt on the ridge, her hands covered in the blood of the man she loved. She did not cry. She did not move. She threw her head back and howled, a long, broken sound of such pure agony that the battle below, for one terrible moment, seemed to pause. The fight was over. The soldiers, their lieutenant gone, their heavy guns destroyed, their morale shattered, were in a full, panicked retreat. The Navajo, having won their home, were shouting in triumph. A fire, started by a stray shot, had caught in a stand of dry juniper. The flames licked at one of the empty hogans. The wind was rising. The fire began to spread. A wall of bright, cleansing flame. It was consuming the dead, the soldiers, the Navajo. It was consuming the past. The tribe had won, but they were scattered. Their leader was dead. Their home was burning. Evelyn looked at the spreading fire, then at the man at her feet. She had won her freedom, but it had cost her everything. The love that had crossed a border had been paid for in blood. The world had no sound. There was only the red rock, the red sky, and the red blood cooling on Evelyn Carter's hands. She was kneeling, her body a hollow, frozen thing, her arms wrapped around Kohana's shoulders, trying to hold in the life that was already gone. His head was heavy in her lap. The battle was over. The shouts of the Navajo warriors, victorious, were a distant, thin sound. Like insects, the smoke from the burning valley floor was acrid, stinging her eyes. But she did not blink. She was staring at his face. The peace she had seen in his dying moment was gone. He was just still. The fire that had been in his eyes was out. She had known him for such a short time. She had loved him. She had killed for him, and he had died for her. Tie-in. A hand on her shoulder. It was Kay, the young scout. His face was streaked with sweat and black powder. "We have won. The soldiers are broken." She did not look at him. "He is dead." The words were flat, dead things in her mouth. Kay knelt, his face tight with grief. He touched Kohana's forehead. "He was a great chief," he whispered. "He died protecting his heart." Get away from him! The voice was not Navajo. It was cold, educated, and shaking with a fury that was almost beyond human. Evelyn turned her head. Slowly, Lieutenant Robert Gaines was standing not 10 feet away. He was not on his horse. He was on his feet, his immaculate blue uniform torn and caked with dirt. His left arm was in a makeshift sling, and a dark, wet stain was spreading across his chest. He was holding his revolver in his right hand. He was not dead. Her shot had hit him, but he was alive. "You," he breathed. His face was pale, his eyes wide, not with pain, but with a kind of murderous, absolute clarity. "You shot me." Behind him, the remnant of his force, perhaps 20 men, were regrouping. They had not fled completely. They had been rallied by their wounded commander. "He is dead," Evelyn said, her voice numb. "It does not matter now." "It matters," Robert hissed. He stepped forward. "It matters that you, a white woman, my betrothed, sided with these animals. It matters that you fired on an officer of the United States Army. It matters that you killed my men." He nudged Kohana's body with his boot. "And it matters that you did it for this." Evelyn's numbness vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp blade of hatred. She laid Kohana's head gently on the rock and stood. "I shot you," she said, her voice clear and carrying in the sudden silence. "I shot you while you were aiming your pistol at a child." Robert's face tightened. "Sergeant, arrest this woman. She is a traitor." 2 soldiers, their faces grim, grabbed her arms. She did not resist. She let Robert's pistol fall from her numb fingers. It clattered on the stone. They pulled her away from Kohana's body. "What of him?" one of the soldiers asked, gesturing to Kohana. "Leave him," Robert spat. "Let the buzzards have him. We are returning to the fort." They dragged her down the slope. As she was pulled away, she saw Sheyazi, the old woman, emerge from the rocks. The old woman and Kay walked to Kohana. They knelt. They did not look at the soldiers. They began to cover his body with a blanket. They were protecting him, even in death. Or so she thought. In a hidden ravine, a mile from the battle, Shoyaze worked. Kay had carried him. Kohana was not dead. Evelyn's bullet, the one meant for the soldier, had missed. The bullet that had struck him had been astray, a spent round that had punched through the muscle of his chest, missing his heart, missing his lungs, but shattering a rib and lodging against his spine. The impact had been so brutal, the shock so profound. It had mimicked death. His breathing was a shallow, ragged whisper, his life a guttering flame. The old woman packed the wound with herbs. She did not know if he would live. He was in the land of shadows, but he was not in the land of the dead. He was hidden. He was alive. Evelyn knew none of this. Her grief was a complete, perfect, and black thing. She was marched back to Fort Gaines, her arms bound. The soldiers did not speak to her. She was worse than a savage. She was an outcast from her own race. The trial was held the next day. It was not a trial. It was a military tribunal, a piece of theater to justify a hanging. They held it on the parade ground. A table was set up for Robert, who sat as judge, his arm in a clean white sling, his face pale but resolute. The jury was a panel of 6 officers, their faces hard. The entire garrison was assembled to watch. A new hanging rope, stark and yellow, already dangled from a beam on the gallows, which had been built to hang Kohana. Evelyn stood before them. She was still in the rags of her silk dress, her hands tied in front of her. She was not afraid. She had passed through fear, through grief, and had come out on the other side. She was empty, but she was clear. "Evelyn Carter," Robert's voice rang out. "You are charged with treason against the United States of America. You are charged with conspiracy to aid a hostile force. You are charged with the attempted murder of a ranking officer. How do you plead?" "Why bother asking?" Evelyn said, her voice quiet. But it carried across the silent yard. You have already tied the noose. Answer the charge. Mistress Carter, do you deny you were with the Navajo? I do not deny it. Do you deny you stole a map detailing troop movements and gave this intelligence to the enemy? I do not deny it. Do you deny, his voice dropped, heavy with venom, that you shot me, your commanding officer, in the back during an engagement? I deny that, Evelyn said clearly. The officers shifted. Robert's face tightened. I did not shoot you in the back. I shot you in the front. You were taking aim at a 7-year-old boy who had fallen in the dust. I shot you to stop a murder. A murmur ran through the soldiers. Robert's gavel slammed down. That is a lie. The witness is hysterical. She was consorting with the savages. Her mind has been turned. My mind, Evelyn said, stepping forward, has been opened. You call them savages. Who is the savage here, the man who fights to protect his home, or the man who writes an order to purge a valley? Who is the savage? The man who takes a bullet to save a life. Her voice cracked, but she willed it steady. Or the man who aims a pistol at a child. You came here with your maps and your Gatling guns to wipe out a people, women and children, for silver, for progress. You are the savage, Lieutenant Gaines. All of you. You are the ones who are godless. She stood there, small and defiant, her words hanging in the dry, hot air. She had spoken the truth. She saw it in the faces of the young soldiers, the flicker of doubt, of shame. Robert's face was white. He stood. The prisoner has confessed to the charges. Her testimony is a wild, traitorous slander. The panel finds her guilty. The sentence is death by hanging, to be carried out immediately. The officers, their faces grim, nodded. Immediately, Robert repeated, his voice a low hiss of triumph. The soldiers grabbed her. They did not want to, but they did. They dragged her toward the gallows. They pushed her up the 3 steps. The hangman, a burly sergeant, pulled the black hood from his pocket. No, Evelyn said, I will not be blinded. I will look at you when you murder me. The sergeant paused, then looked at Robert. Robert nodded, a curt, angry gesture. The sergeant threw the hood to the ground. He put the coarse, stiff noose over her head and tightened it. It bit into the skin of her neck. She looked out. She saw the faces of the soldiers. She saw the flag, the one her husband had died for. She saw the hard, pale blue of Robert's eyes. He was smiling. The sergeant put his hand on the lever. A sound, a single high-pitched cry, the call of a nighthawk. A soldier, his face suddenly pale, looked up. What in God's name? A second cry, from the other side of the fort, and a third. Ambush, a sentry screamed from the wall. They are inside the fort! It was impossible. The gates were closed, but warriors were dropping from the walls, appearing from storage sheds, rising from the empty wagons. Yazi had not just healed Kohana. She had used her network. The protected natives in the camp, the ones who had been allowed inside to clean, to smuggle in a small, desperate war party. A warrior, his face painted black and white, his body pale and weak but burning with a fire that was not human, stood on the roof of the barracks. He held a rifle. It was Kohana. He was alive. Evelyn's heart, which she had thought was dead, exploded in her chest. Kohana! She screamed. He raised the rifle and fired. The sergeant at the gallows lever crumpled to the ground. Chaos. The fort, which had been a place of order, became a slaughterhouse. The garrison, caught completely by surprise, ran for their weapons. The Navajo, 20 of them, fought with the strength of 100. They were not there to win the fort. They were there to free their chief's heart. Evelyn ripped the noose from her neck and scrambled down the gallows steps. Evelyn! Robert roared. He had drawn his sword. He was running at her, his face a mask of primal fury. If he could not hang her, he would kill her himself. She had nowhere to run. She stood at the base of the gallows, waiting for the steel. A body slammed into Robert, knocking him sideways. It was Kohana. He had leapt from the barracks roof, his bad leg collapsing under him as he landed, but his momentum was enough. The two men rolled in the dust. Kohana's rifle was gone. Robert's sword had skittered away. They both rose, breathing hard, facing each other. Robert, his left arm useless, pulled a long boot knife. Kohana held his own knife. It was not a duel, it was a brawl. Robert was a trained swordsman, but he was wounded. Kohana was a warrior, but he was half dead. They crashed together, stabbing, punching, rolling. Robert was shouting. A stream of curses. Kohana was silent, his breath hissing between his teeth, his entire being focused on the single, deadly purpose of killing this man. He was stronger, even wounded. His raw desert strength was more than Robert's civilized training. He smashed his fist into Robert's face. He got inside Robert's guard. He twisted the knife from Robert's hand. He was on top of him, his own knife pressed to Robert's throat. Robert was panting, his eyes wide with terror. He was beaten. Kohana looked at him, his chest heaving. He looked at the man who had ordered the purge, who had tried to kill a child, who had tried to hang Tyen. He raised the knife for the final, killing blow. "No!" Evelyn's voice. Kohana paused. He looked at her. She was standing beside him. "Do not," she said. "Do not be him. We have won. Do not murder." Kohana looked down at the terrified, bleeding man beneath him. He looked at Evelyn. He understood. He did not want Robert's small, dark spirit inside him. He raised his fist and struck Robert on the jaw. A single, brutal blow. Robert went limp, unconscious. Kohana stood, swaying. He was bleeding from a dozen new wounds. He looked at Evelyn. "Tyen?" He breathed. He was alive. She rushed to him, holding him, her tears, the tears she had not shed for his death. Finally coming for his life. "I thought you were dead," she sobbed. "Not yet," he whispered, leaning on her. The battle was over. The surviving soldiers had thrown down their guns. The Navajo warriors were in control. Evelyn looked at Kohana, then at the unconscious form of Robert. Then she looked up. The American flag was still flying from the tall flagpole in the center of the yard. It was a symbol of everything that had tried to kill them. She pulled the knife from Kohana's belt. She walked, her steps sure and steady, to the flagpole. She found the thick rope. She did not lower the flag. She began to saw at the rope, cutting it. The thick hemp parted. The flag, the symbol of a nation's power and its lies, slid down the pole. It hit the dust of the parade ground with a soft, final sound. Evelyn stood, the knife in her hand, breathing in the free, dusty air. Kohana was beside her, his arm around her. They were surrounded by warriors, by captured soldiers, in a fort that was no longer a fort, but just a place of wood and stone. They had won. They were free. The dust of the parade ground was a carpet for a fallen flag. The victory was a sharp, coppery taste in the air. Evelyn Carter held Kohana, her arms wrapped around his waist, his weight leaning on her, his blood-soaked body trembling with the last of his adrenaline. He was alive. He was breathing. He had come back from the dead for her. "Kohana," she whispered, her face buried in his chest. "You are alive." He tried to answer. A cough, wet and deep, seized him. He bent double, and a fresh, bright spray of blood burst from his lips, spotting the dust. The joy in Evelyn's heart turned to ice. She pulled back. This was not the blood from his knife wounds. This was from inside. As a nurse, she knew its meaning. "The old wound," he whispered, his hand going to his chest, to the place the bullet had struck him on the ridge. The wound that had been torn open in the fight with Robert. "It is finished." He was swaying, his face a pale, ashen gray under the paint and grime. The fire in his eyes, which had burned so bright, was beginning to flicker, to dim. The warriors, his warriors, were gathering around, their faces, which had been triumphant, now filling with a new, dawning horror. "No," Evelyn said. It was not a scream, like the one on the ridge. It was a cold, hard command. "No, I will not let you. We will take you to the hospital. I will get my tools. I will save you." He caught her hand as she turned. His grip was surprisingly strong. "No," he whispered. "No more. White man's medicine. No more. Walls." He looked past the fort, past the parade ground, toward the high cliffs to the east. The first faint hint of gray was touching the blackness. The dawn was coming. "Take me up," he panted, his gaze fixed on the ridge. "I will not die in this cage." He knew. He was a warrior. He knew the feel of death, and he knew it was inside him now, a cold, spreading pool. "Ke," Evelyn called, her voice breaking. "Help me. We must carry him." Kay and another warrior, their faces stricken, made a chair with their hands. They lifted Kohana, who was now almost boneless. Evelyn walked beside them, holding his hand, her other hand pressed to his chest, a futile, desperate attempt to hold his life inside him. They walked out of the captured fort, a small, mournful procession. They left the unconscious Robert Gaines, the captured soldiers, the fallen flag. They left the victory behind. They climbed the dark trail, the same one she had scrambled down after seeing him die the first time. The climb was an agony. He groaned with every jolt, but he did not tell them to stop. He watched the sky. He was racing the sun. They reached the high ridge, the very spot where she had knelt, howling, believing him dead. The wind was clean up here, cold and sharp. It smelled of pine and distant rain. They laid him down on the flat rock, his head in her lap. He was facing east, toward the growing light. Evelyn cradled him. She was a nurse. She knew what to do for a dying man. She was supposed to make him comfortable, but this was not a patient. This was the other half of her soul. "It is beautiful," he whispered, his eyes on the horizon, which was now a thin, sharp line of pale orange. "Kohana, do not leave me," she sobbed, her tears, the ones she had held back, now falling freely, splashing onto his face. "Please, I love you." He turned his head, his movements slow, and looked up at her. His eyes were clear, the pain fading, replaced by a deep, profound calm. He saw her tears. He raised his hand, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "Do not cry, Tayan, you brought the light. You are my heart." He said something, very softly, in his own language. The words were like music, like the wind. "What?" she whispered, leaning down. "What did you say?" He smiled. It was the smile from the hot spring, the smile of peace, of finding Din Bizad, our tongue. It says Hozo. It means beauty, peace, but it means more. He took a long, ragged breath. Freedom is when we are no longer afraid to love. His eyes held hers. She saw the hot spring, the fire, the ridge, the battle. She saw her whole life, the life that mattered, reflected in his gaze. "I love you," she said. "I know," he whispered. His hand, which had been on her cheek, slid down. It rested, for a moment, on her stomach, a simple, gentle pressure. Then it fell away, limp, onto the rock. His chest rose, one last time, and then it did not. His eyes, fixed on her face, went still. The light was in the sky, but the light was gone from him. He was dead. This time, he was truly dead. He had come back for her, and it had cost him the last of his life. She sat there, holding him. The sun, in a cruel, magnificent explosion of color, burst over the horizon. The red light washed over them, over his peaceful, smiling face. Over her, a woman frozen in time, holding her dead love. She did not know how long she sat there. An hour, 2. The sun was warm on her back. The fort below was silent. She heard soft footsteps. It was Shiyazi. The old woman's face was a mask of ancient, settled grief. She carried a beautiful woven blanket, one of red and black, and a small, smooth piece of blue turquoise. The old woman did not speak. She simply knelt, together. They washed his body. They cleaned the blood, the paint, the grime. Evelyn's hands, the hands of a nurse, moved with a gentle, loving reverence. This was the last time she would touch him. This was her final act of care. They wrapped him in the red and black blanket. Shiyazi placed the sacred turquoise stone in his cold hand, folding his fingers around it, a passport for his journey. Evelyn bent, her hair, the color of dark honey, falling around her face. She took the knife from her belt and cut a long, thick lock. She placed it in his hand with the stone. A part of her would go with him. Kay and the other warriors had dug a grave. Deep in the rock of the ridge he had chosen. They had worked all morning. They lifted him, wrapped in his blanket shroud, and laid him inside, his body facing the east. Evelyn stood at the edge. She took a handful of the red earth. She let it fall, the sound of the dirt on the blanket a soft, final punctuation. "Go in beauty," she whispered. The Navajo word, hozo, catching in her throat. They filled the grave, placing the last heavy stones on top. It was done. He was part of the land now. As they stood, a shadow passed over them. Evelyn looked up. A great eagle, its wings spread wide, was circling overhead. It caught the morning sun, a flash of gold and brown. It cried out, a single, sharp sound, and then banked, riding the wind, climbing higher and higher until it was just a speck, disappearing into the sun. His soul was free. Evelyn turned to Shiyazi. "I will tell his story," she said, her voice raw but steady. "I will tell the world what happened here, what they did, who he was. I promise you, I will not let them lie." The old woman nodded. "You are Tayan. You must. That is your fight, now." She looked at the fort, then at the distant dust clouds to the south. "You must go. The bluecoats, the ones who ran, they will bring more, many more. This place is not safe. We are scattering to the high canyons. You cannot come." "I am not one of them," Evelyn said, gesturing to the fort. "But I am not one of you, either." "You are one of us," Shiyazi said, her voice softening. "You are Kohana's heart, and you carry his child." Evelyn's head snapped up. "What?" "I am old," the woman said, her eyes on Evelyn's waist. "I have seen many women, the sickness in the morning, the paleness. I saw it when you were in our valley. You did not. You were too afraid. You carry his son." Evelyn's hand flew to her stomach, to the place his hand had rested before he died. It was impossible. It was true. The night in the hot spring, the one night of peace, of freedom, a child, a part of him, still alive, growing inside her. The grief, the emptiness, was suddenly filled with a fierce, terrified, and defiant hope. It was not over. He had not left her. "Go!" Shiyazi commanded, her voice urgent. "Take his horse, the Pinto. Ride north toward the Ute lands. Do not stop. Do not look back. Raise him. Raise the son of the chief. Tell him who his father was." Kay brought the horse, Kohana's horse. It nudged her, as if it understood. Evelyn Carter, the widow from the east, the nurse from Silver Mesa, was gone. She had been burned away in the battle and buried in the grave. Tayan, the woman who brought the light, mounted the horse. She looked one last time at the pile of stones on the ridge. She looked at the fort, at the smoking valley, at the land that had taken everything from her and given her everything. She turned the horse north. She did not look back. she rode away from Silver Mesa, carrying the truth, carrying a promise, and carrying the future. 3 years passed. The wind still blew, but it now carried the black smoke of smelters and the sharp, chemical smell of the new silver processing plants. Silver Mesa was no longer a raw outpost. It was a wealthy, ugly town. It had a brick bank, 3 new saloons, and a church with a real glass window. The fort had been expanded, a permanent stone fixture that dominated the landscape, a monument to the final pacification of the territory. The Navajo, the ones who had survived the subsequent campaigns, were gone, pushed south into a barren reservation 100 miles away. The Red Hill was just a name on a map, a place where miners picnicked on Sundays. A woman stepped off the stagecoach from Santa Fe. She was not the same woman who had fled on a pinto horse. She was dressed in a simple, practical black dress. Her hair, the color of dark honey, was pulled back, but there were streaks of gray at her temples, put there not by age, but by memory. She was Evelyn Carter, but she was not. She held the hand of a small boy. The town did not recognize her at first. They saw a lone woman and a child, then a man, one of the old-time miners, squinted. "Sweet Mary," he whispered. "It is her. It is the traitor nurse. Carter." The name spread down the boardwalk like a brush fire. Evelyn Carter, the one who ran, the Navajo lover. Men stopped. Women came out of the dry goods store, their faces hard. Evelyn Carter, or Tayan Carter as she now called herself, did not flinch. She picked up her single bag and began to walk, not toward the old infirmary, but toward the new hotel. The crowd parted for her, as if she were carrying a plague. She was not just a pariah, she was a scandal. 2 months ago, a book had arrived in the East, published in Boston under the name Tayan Carter. It was called The Fire on Red Hill. It was not a polite, civilized book. It was a raw, brutal, and honest accounting. It told of a warrior named Kohana. It told of a lieutenant named Robert Gaines. It told of a map, of Gatling guns, of a plan to purge a valley. It told of a battle, of a man who died for his people, and of a child who was murdered by a United States officer. It told the truth. Back east, it was a sensation. It was debated in parlors. Church groups called for an investigation. The government called it a wild, hysterical lie. The fantasy of a traumatized woman. Here in Silver Mesa, it was treason. Robert Gaines had not been there to read it. After the battle at the fort, his wound, the one she had given him, had festered. He had been sent back east in disgrace, not for his war crimes, but for his incompetence, for losing a fort to a handful of savages. He had died of sepsis in a hospital in St. Louis. Evelyn checked into the hotel. The clerk, his face pale, gave her the key. "How long you stayin', ma'am?" "As long as it takes," she said. For a week, she walked the town. She was an accusation in a black dress. Miners spat at her feet. The respectable women of the town crossed the street to avoid her. She was utterly alone. But not entirely. One night, a package was left outside her hotel room. It was a small, beautifully woven Navajo blanket. There was no note. Another day, an old prospector, one she did not recognize, tipped his hat. "My boy was at that fort, ma'am," he said in a low voice, not looking at her. He quit the army after. He said you wrote the truth." Her purpose was not the town. Her purpose was the hill. She had used the money from the book, the money they called blood money, and she had hired a stone carver in Santa Fe. A large wagon arrived, bearing a single, tall slab of red sandstone. She had bought a small plot of land, the very ridge where he had died, the land that overlooked the valley. The men in the town refused to help her. "We will not build a monument to savages," the town marshal told her, his hand on his gun. "I am not asking you to," she said. "I am just informing you that I am." She hired men from the new railroad. Chinese laborers who did not care about the town's politics, only about the wages. They worked for 3 days, hauling the stone, setting it in the earth. Evelyn was there the entire time, her son playing in the dust at her feet. When it was done, it was not a grand statue of a soldier on a horse. It was a simple, stark column of red rock, as raw and as beautiful as the land itself. And carved into it were the names, not the soldiers, the Navajo. The names Kay had given her, the names of the men, women, and children who had died in the valley, in the fight for their home. At the top, one name was carved deeper than the rest, Kohana. The town was furious. There was talk of tearing it down, of running her out on a rail. But they did not. There was something in her stillness, in her absolute lack of fear, that held them back. She had already lost everything. She was untouchable. On the last day, she walked from the town, leading her son. It was a long, hard climb. The boy, who was almost 3, did not complain. He had his father's endurance. He had his father's eyes. She reached the ridge as the sun was setting. The monument stood against the red sky. A silent, permanent witness. A few yards away was the simple, unmarked pile of stones that was Kohana's grave. The wind was the only sound. The boy, Luke, toddled over to the grave. He was a beautiful child, his skin the color of pale copper, his hair as black as a raven's wing. He looked at the pile of rocks with a solemn, childish curiosity. Evelyn knelt. She opened her bag and took out a small, tied bundle. It was wild thyme, which she had gathered on the walk, the same sharp, clean scent she remembered from the hidden canyons. She laid the small bouquet on the rocks. She looked at her son. He was watching her, his eyes, so like his father's, calm and peaceful. He did not understand death. He only understood that this was a special place. "This is your father," Evelyn whispered, her hand resting on the grave. She looked at her son, her voice thick but steady. "Our son will know who his father was." Luke Kohana Carter reached out his small, brown hand and touched the rough stones. He looked at his mother, and then at the sky, and he smiled. It was his father's smile. Evelyn pulled him close, her heart aching with a love and a grief that had become the same thing. The wind blew her hair across her face, and for a moment, in the dying light, she was no longer a writer, or a pariah, or a widow. She was just Tyann, holding her son on the land that held her heart. 10 years. The wind had not changed. It still came down from the high mesas with the scent of pine and dry dust. But the land it touched was different. Silver Mesa was no longer a town of raw timber and raw men. The silver vein had run deeper than anyone expected. The town now boasted a 2-story brick schoolhouse, a bank with a polished marble floor, and a telegraph office that chattered day and night, connecting this patch of high desert to a world Evelyn Carter had almost forgotten. The fort, now named Fort Commitment, was quiet. The war was a memory, a story told by old soldiers in the saloons. The Navajo were far to the south, on reservation land, their spirits broken by years of systematic relocation. The world had moved on. Evelyn Carter, or Tyann Carter as she was known to the world, rode her horse, a sturdy bay along the high ridge. She was no longer the frightened widow who had arrived here so long ago, nor the wild-eyed fugitive in a torn silk dress. Her hair, once the color of dark honey, was now more silver than gold, pulled back in a simple, practical braid. The lines on her face were deep, etched by sun and grief. But they were not lines of anger. They were lines of peace. Beside her, on a spirited pinto, rode a young man of 13 years. He was tall for his age, lean and strong, with a grace that seemed to come from the earth itself. He had his father's black hair, straight and thick, and his father's eyes, black and calm and missing nothing. He had his mother's steady hands and her thoughtful mouth. He was Luke Kohana Carter, and he was a bridge. They rode in a comfortable silence. their relationship one of deep, unspoken understanding. The teacher says the railroad will lay track through the lower pass next spring, Luke said. His voice was clear, his English perfect, educated in the brick schoolhouse in the valley below. It will bring a lot of noise, and a lot of new people, Evelyn said, her eyes on the horizon. Luke was quiet for a moment. He shifted in his saddle, his gaze sweeping the rocks, his posture relaxed but alert. Then, his voice changed, the intonation becoming softer, more melodic. He spoke in Dain Bizad. She Yazi says the iron snake will frighten the spirits of the land. She says it is not a Hozo thing. Evelyn replied in the same tongue, her accent perfect, learned over years of secret visits and patient teaching. She Yaji is wise, but the world changes, my son. Our task is not to stop the wind, but to build a home that is strong enough to stand against it. He nodded, accepting this. He was a creature of two worlds, and he walked in both with a confidence that was his alone. He learned arithmetic and history from the white school teacher. He learned the stories of the holy people, the way of the horse, and the language of the wind from the small, stubborn band of Navajo, led by an ancient Shiyazi who had been permitted, after years of Evelyn's tireless petitions, to return to a small, protected parcel of their ancestral land. They were not riding to the old valley. They were riding to the monument. Today was Red Hill Day. It had taken 8 years, but her book, The Fire on Red Hill, had done its work. The initial outrage in Silver Mesa had been volcanic. They had called her a liar, a traitor, a whore. But the book, fueled by an East Coast press hungry for sensation and scandal, had led to a congressional inquiry. The testimony of soldiers who had been there, men who had been haunted by Robert Gaines's order to kill a child, had confirmed her story. The pacification of the Red Hill was seen for what it was, a failed, brutal massacre, led by a disgraced officer. Time, and the weight of the truth, had slowly, grudgingly, changed the town. The old, hard-bitten miners had mostly moved on, replaced by families, by merchants, by men who had not been part of the blood. The monument on the ridge, the one she had built with her blood money, was no longer seen as an insult. It was a landmark. It was history. The town council, in an act of political self-preservation that they had framed as moral courage, had declared this date a day of reconciliation. As they reached the crest, they saw them. Not a crowd, just a small gathering. The current mayor of Silver Mesa stood, his hat in his hands. A few of the town's older families were there, looking awkward, and sitting on a blanket near the pile of stones that marked Kohana's grave was Shur Yazi, her face like a dried apple, her eyes as bright as a bird's. She was surrounded by a dozen of her people. Luke slid from his horse and went to the old woman, bending to kiss her cheek. He was her student, her grandson in all but blood. Evelyn dismounted, her body stiff. She walked to the monument, the red stone column that bore the names of the dead. She laid her hand on the single, deeply carved name at the top, Kohana. 10 years, it felt like a lifetime. It felt like a single breath. The mayor, a new man from Chicago, cleared his throat. "Mistress Carter," he said, approaching her. We are glad you are here. A small gesture." He gestured to the monument. "The town council has voted to maintain this site, to protect it, as a reminder." "A reminder of what, Mayor?" Evelyn asked, her voice quiet. That we must live together," he finished lamely. Evelyn nodded, accepting the clumsy but real offering. "Thank you." She left them to their speeches. She walked to the grave, sitting on the warm rock beside Shiyaji, her son between them. She looked out over the valley. It was green again. The scars of the fire were gone, healed by a decade of rain and sun. That evening, she was home. She had repurchased her small cabin on the edge of the canyon, the place where she had once stared into the wildness. Terrified. It was not a place of fear anymore. It was her ho-ho. Luke was asleep in his room, a book of English poetry and a Navajo prayer bundle side by side on his table. Evelyn sat at her small desk. She lit a single lamp. She opened the leather-bound journal she had kept for all these years. Her hand, knotted now, the skin thin over the knuckles, picked up the pen. She looked out the window. The sun was setting. The western sky was a miracle. A vast, impossible painting of orange, of deep violet, and of a red so profound it made her heart ache. It was not the red of the battle. It was not the red of blood spilled on the stones. It was the deep, warm red of a dying fire, of embers that still held heat, of a hope that could not be extinguished. She dipped her pen. She wrote the date, her hand steady. She thought of the man buried on the hill. She thought of his son, sleeping in the next room. She wrote the last line, the one that had taken her a lifetime to understand. Freedom is not in the color of the skin. It is in daring to touch the heart of another. She closed the book. She smiled, a small, quiet smile. A cool wind, the same wind, the eternal wind, blew through the open window, carrying the scent of sage. It did not sound like a howl. It did not sound like a scream. It sounded, for all the world, like a new beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please share your city or country in the comments below, so we can all connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this tale, please consider subscribing to our channel, Wild West Tales, and giving this video a like, and do not forget to hit that hype button. It really helps the story get heard by more people.